Your oppressors are under investigation, and you didn't even move. That's the beauty of patience. How it dismantles arrogance without lifting a single hand. They thought stillness meant surrender, thought your silence meant defeat. They didn't realize silence has a weight, and when carried long enough, it bends outcomes without effort. You let them speak. You let them build lies, thinking volume could make fiction sound factual. But every exaggeration carried its own evidence. You understood what they didn't, that truth doesn't chase attention. It waits for exhaustion. They built their empire on deceit, but deceit requires energy to maintain. You conserved yours, and now, while you sit calm, their stories collapse under their own contradictions. The universe always conducts its own audits. You simply allowed it. They thought power meant protection, but power without integrity is a liability waiting to surface. You didn't expose them, their patterns did. You watched them sabotage themselves in slow motion, tripping over the very traps they set for you. Every time they pushed boundaries, every time they spoke carelessly, they left footprints on their own intentions. You never needed revenge because justice disguised itself as irony. They didn't see it happening. They thought your stillness was weakness, but it was strategy. The calm mind always sees what the desperate overlook. Now they scramble to contain consequences that don't even require your involvement. The silence that once made them mock you has become the silence that condemns them. Oppressors thrive on reaction. They need your outrage to justify their tyranny, your resistance to validate their control. You robbed them of both. You refuse to perform. And when there's no reaction, manipulation loses traction. You broke their rhythm by refusing to play their game. While they kept shouting, you kept refining. While they plotted your downfall, you built an immunity to chaos. You stopped defending your name and started protecting your energy. That shift is what doomed them. They mistook composure for compliance, never realizing you were letting time collect evidence for you. Every unprovoked insult, every petty attempt to discredit you, every whisper against your character, they all aged poorly under scrutiny. Now they're the ones explaining. You're the one watching. The psychology behind this is poetic. Guilt has a timer. When people commit wrongdoing, their nervous system registers it even before consequence arrives. It festers. It distorts sleep, alters tone, weakens conviction. You could hear it in their voice, the subtle cracks in confidence, the forced laughter, the shifting eyes. That's what real exposure looks like. Not headlines, not chaos, energy that can no longer sustain deception. You didn't need to accuse anyone. Life did that for you. The truth has gravity, and gravity doesn't require noise. Their guilt dragged them down quietly, elegantly, and irreversibly. That's what you waited for. That's why you never rushed. They didn't understand that peace can be a weapon. You learned that revenge carried out through composure lasts longer than retaliation. You didn't confront them because confrontation gives attention, and attention feeds ego. Instead, you created a silence they couldn't interpret. That silence made them paranoid. They began over-explaining, overreacting, overreaching. You never needed to prove your innocence. Their own desperation did it for you. When people are guilty, they eventually reveal it in their attempts to appear clean. You simply became the mirror. Every projection bounced back. Every manipulation fell flat. You mastered the art of strategic detachment, the kind that makes corrupt power eat itself alive. They built their image on control, but control is fragile when rooted in fear. You understood that fear governs oppressors more than authority ever does. They fear exposure. They fear losing the narrative. They fear the silence of someone who knows more than they say. You gave them that silence. That's why they started investigating each other. When confidence collapses, loyalty follows. They used to whisper about you. Now they whisper about each other. You didn't divide them. They divided themselves, trying to survive the fallout of their own schemes. Your stillness became a mirror that reflected every secret they tried to bury. They thought they had won until they realized their victory was just the beginning of accountability. Every empire built on deceit eventually reaches a point where lies overlap. And when lies overlap, they cancel each other out. That's what's happening now. Their own contradictions are standing trial, and your name isn't even in the room. That's the poetic revenge life gives to those who endure quietly. You let their words age, and age reveals truth like light reveals cracks in glass. They're being questioned now. by circumstance, by conscience, by the very people they once used as pawns. You didn't ruin them. They simply encountered the version of themselves they thought would never be seen. And when people meet their truth without disguise, it destroys them more efficiently than any revenge plan ever could. The world often teaches you to fight back loudly, to defend your worth in public. But you learn something deeper, that silence guided by clarity can end battles without noise. You didn't stay quiet because you were afraid. You stayed quiet because you trusted time more than temper. And time, when aligned with integrity, is undefeated. You didn't control the investigation, but you didn't need to. Reality has a way of rebalancing itself. Those who operate in shadows always forget that exposure doesn't need enemies. It only needs contrast. You became that contrast. You didn't move, but the truth moved through everything they built. Now you can see it in their faces. The unease, the cautious tones, the avoidance. They know you know. They know the facade has cracked. They can't speak to you with the same arrogance, because the hierarchy shifted without warning. Power was never taken from them. It just returned to equilibrium. Their names now sit beside the consequences they tried to hide from. You walk freely, unburdened, while they calculate the cost of deceit. That's how victory often looks, not with fireworks, but with composure. You don't announce it, you witness it.
You stayed calm enough to make it inevitable. They thought the only way to win was through noise, through rushing, pushing, forcing outcomes into existence. You moved differently. You understood that calmness is not surrender, it's calculation. You didn't chase results, you positioned yourself for them. You let pressure expose who was built for the long game and who only survives through chaos. Calm minds are dangerous because they see patterns the impulsive miss. While they drowned in their reactions, you studied cause and consequence. You measured tone, timing, and truth. They kept making moves out of fear of losing, but you only moved when the board was yours. You weren't lucky. You were patient enough to make luck irrelevant. They underestimated the velocity hidden inside composure. Stillness looks passive to those addicted to control. But you weren't passive. You were coiling energy. Every insult, every loss, every betrayal became stored fuel, waiting for precision. While they burned energy explaining themselves, you conserved yours. That's why when you acted, the results seemed divine, unstoppable, fated. They called it coincidence because admitting it was strategy would mean acknowledging their own impatience. You stayed calm not because you lacked emotion, but because you refused to let emotion dictate execution. Calm doesn't mean cold, it means controlled. You let the storm rage and waited for silence, because silence always reveals who's left standing. They wanted you to panic so they could predict you. They studied your reactions, searched for patterns to exploit, but you broke their rhythm by refusing to participate. Panic is predictable. Calm is chaos in disguise. You used their aggression as camouflage, letting them exhaust themselves. You knew that when adrenaline fades, mistakes multiply. That's the advantage of a still mind. It watches energy drain from the reckless. They didn't realize that every outburst, every act of desperation, every word they couldn't take back, only made your outcome more certain. You didn't rush revenge. You let gravity do the work. Everything eventually collapses toward truth, and truth always lands on the side of those who wait. Calm people make the impatient destroy themselves. You watched this unfold. They overcompensated with performance. They faked confidence to cover fear. They overexplained, overacted, overreacted, because calm unnerves the unstable. You didn't need to threaten them, your silence did. They filled it with their own paranoia, and paranoia is the mother of error. You became a mirror they couldn't read. Every decision they made after that came from insecurity, not intelligence. That's how you won without conflict. You didn't dominate them, you dismantled their certainty. They lost control of rhythm, tone, and timing, while you stayed anchored. The mind that can remain calm under pressure doesn't just survive. It manipulates the entire environment without lifting a hand. There's a psychology behind inevitability. Calmness sharpens perception. When you're not consumed by noise, you start seeing the micro signals others miss. The slight hesitation before a lie, the shift in expression before deceit, the tone before betrayal. You began to anticipate outcomes before they materialized. That anticipation became prophecy. You didn't guess what would happen. You simply followed patterns to their natural conclusion. That's what true inevitability is, not control, but understanding. They kept mistaking movement for progress while you mastered prediction. You weren't shocked by anything, because you had already seen it unfold in their behavior. They thought your detachment was arrogance, but it was awareness. You had already made peace with the outcome before they realized they were walking into it. You learned the art of still dominance, the ability to influence events without disrupting them. Every empire falls because its builders panic. Every manipulator fails because they overuse control. You understood that timing rules everything. When others react instantly, they hand over control. You responded deliberately, never too soon, never too late. That's what made everything inevitable. You let tension rise naturally until it snapped. And when it did, it broke on your schedule. That's the kind of power few understand. The kind that doesn't announce itself but bends reality quietly. You didn't need validation. You had patience, and patience is the most dangerous form of certainty. They mistook your calm for ignorance. They told themselves you didn't see what they were doing, that your quiet meant blindness. But calmness is the camouflage of the intelligent. You saw everything, but you didn't interrupt. You let them write the story, while you waited for the plot to betray itself. The ones who rush to expose others often expose themselves first. You understood that truth requires no defense. It just requires endurance. You endured long enough for masks to slip, for alliances to fracture, for guilt to mature into evidence. That's why you didn't move. Because inevitability is not created through force, it's created through restraint. In relationships, this lesson became sharper. You saw how people confuse excitement with love, how they rush into connection to fill silence. You didn't rush. You waited for consistency, for alignment, for truth to reveal itself through patterns, not promises. That's why your detachment scared them. You made them realize that real strength doesn't beg for clarity. It creates it by staying calm through uncertainty. They lost you not because you vanished, but because they couldn't sustain chaos without your reaction. They needed your emotion to keep the illusion alive, but you gave them logic instead. Logic always ends the game early. Every time you stayed calm, you took something from them without saying a word. Their confidence, their advantage, their illusions, it all faded against your restraint. That's what true psychological warfare looks like: control without conflict. You taught yourself how to hold composure until composure turned into power. You didn't retaliate when provoked, didn't explain when misunderstood, didn't justify when blamed. You let outcomes reveal everything that words could not. Calmness isn't just emotional stability, it's tactical silence. You made the future fold in your favor by waiting long enough for it to catch up with your preparation.